Bulavanaka, welcome to Simpson at 8. Parliament was in session this week and quite a bit of issues were debated. The issues surrounding Fiji Airways remains prominent, and the Minister for Economy, Ayaz Said Qayyum, made a ministerial statement on Fiji Airways. We start off this evening's show by playing part of that ministerial statement, to be followed by the response by NFP leader Biman Prasad.
Mr. Speaker, sir, we've seen absurd allegations about Wangavuka Financing Limited, a company whose purpose we clearly explained numerous times, including back in February. You can Google it. There are articles dating back 7 years ago explaining what this company is and what purpose it serves. We have Honorable Biman Prasad asking for Fiji Airways financials. If he bothered to scrounge up $10.90, he could easily obtain Fiji Airways financial statements dating back to its date of incorporation as required by the Companies Act. Opposition supporters are demanding to know how we are able to share profits with Fiji Airways staff when the fleet is currently grounded. Of course, there were last year's profits, had anyone actually bothered to check financial year Jan to December. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have politicians claiming our carrier is technically insolvent and bankrupt. Both wrong. If it was, it would not be able to access outside financing, which it has. Honorable Prasad has said that because the company has deferred loan repayments, it is technically insolvent. As I've explained to Honorable Prasad, many companies, including some large companies that he is familiar with, we are familiar with, have deferred loan repayments. They no longer have a cash flow. If they're operating proud, they're operating tapus, the sales are down, a lot of companies. They go to the bank and say, please defer my principal repayments. Does not mean they're technically insolvent. That does not mean, Mr. Speaker, sir, that they're technically insolvent. Of course, if your source of revenue is withered away, cash flow will be affected. That does not mean, again, you're insolvent. In fact, prouds and tapus at the airport, because they get duty-free access to all these goods, for example, chocolates, they said we no longer can sell because nobody's coming through. Can you make it duty-free for us if you sold it within Fiji? We agreed to that. Does that mean they're technically insolvent? Mr. Speaker, sir, we even have some people claiming that Fiji Airways was overly expensive and overly ambitious in the lead up to its unpredictable pandemic. But they were quiet when they saw the new A350s arrive. They were quiet when we reopened Japan, when we went to Singapore, when we increased the flights to San Francisco, scheduled flights. Those new routes and acquisitions added new jobs for pilots, flight attendants, caterers, ATS workers, more catering required. They brought more tourists and more revenue into the country. The truth is, due to competition from Qantas on its bread and butter routes, the airline intended to invest in its competitiveness to seize a greater share of our traditional markets and open flows of new arrivals from the other parts of the world. Otherwise, COVID or not, its viability could be in jeopardy. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want those who spent the past few weeks attacking Fiji Airways to take a good look at themselves in the mirror and ask, why are we doing this? They should ask, why are we undermining a Fijian company so critical to our economic comeback? And who possibly gains from our attacks? Mr. Speaker, sir, right now we should be a united front, ready to defend our carrier through thick and thin. We should all be doing everything possible to protect the future jobs it will bring back and the future activity it will generate for our economy. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want those attacking our airline, our national airline, to put their egos aside and imagine a Fiji without Fiji Airways, with air travel into and out of Fiji at the mercy of a foreign carrier. Fares to get in and out of Fiji would shoot through the roof. We have no control. We depend entirely on overseas airlines who may only run regular routes in the peak season, unlike Fiji Airways, which operates on a daily basis, generating much needed foreign exchange. Mr. Speaker, sir, Fiji would not see a cent of that foreign exchange should we see the demise of Fiji Airways. All of that economic activity would be shipped offshore. The crew of every flight would be foreign, taking jobs from our people. The catering would be done overseas, no more ATS catering. The engineering would occur overseas, shipping ATS jobs offshore, along with every ancillary business to the airline industry. As we highlighted the other day, there are many people who actually live off the industry, even in the informal sector. Farmers, Fijian farmers who supply vegetables, Yangon, LA, San Francisco, Sydney, Brisbane, they would potentially lose out the market because they would be beholden to a foreign carrier. Our farmers who export root crops, overseas on a weekly basis, some of them on 2-3 times a week, would be subject to the whims of a foreign company. Mr. Speaker, it's clear some of the members on the opposite side have not thought any of this through. They can barely see past their own noses, much less through to the next month or next year. They won't see the suffering that will come from our national carrier going under until that very moment is upon us. But some of our critics know exactly what they're doing. They're looking past this crisis all the way to 2022. They're intentionally being hypocrites, and their sights are set on crippling our carrier, crippling our recovery, and crippling our economy. Also, they can point the finger at government in the next elections. One of these dishonest hypocrites used to serve as a minister for finance, and indeed at once was the Prime Minister of Fiji. In 2008, that year actually, he claimed Fiji Airways was overly, I must say this. Now he's claiming that Fiji Airways was overly ambitious pre-COVID. But 12 years ago, he was singing to a very different tune, as he called on the then Air Pacific to modernize its fleet, explore new destinations. In his own words from a press release stated on 27 May 2008, some of you are now singing the same mantra of Mahendra Chaudhry. He says, and I quote, he said then, Air Pacific is a stagnating airline. Its profit is declining. It is not expanding. No new major international destinations have been added to its flight network in the past 2 decades. He says again, it is ridiculous for anyone to say that as a major shareholder, the Fiji government should sit back and not take timely action to set things right to avert. He then says, as Fiji's flagship carrier, it is expected to contribute to a vibrant tourism industry by exploring expansion into new markets and destinations. But we have not seen the national airline embark on new initiatives in the past 2 decades. All of this, Mr. Speaker, sir, what he claimed then should have been done, actually has been done. But now, Mr. Speaker, sir, when Fiji Airways actually has gone on to realize that objective, he could have never, which he never himself would have implemented, he may be bitter about that. But there's no excuse to start arguing against the very points he made 12 years ago. And some of you are actually now saying the same things. Mr. Speaker, so let's again look at New Zealand. Despite the fact that they're heading into an election next month, I should say, the government's loan to the airline hasn't turned ugly and become some hotly contested political issue. The CEO of Air New Zealand isn't having to defend the airline from being turned into a political football. Lucky for him, he operates in a country where the opposition understands how a globally integrated economy works. Sadly, it's becoming clear we can't say the same for Fiji. And we ask the critics who have spent this global pandemic sniping at Fiji Airways, do you seriously think that Kiwis should be handling things differently? Or is supporting a national carrier only a problem when Fiji does it?
That was the Minister for Economy, Ayaz Syed Qayyum. We'll now play the response to the ministerial statement by the NFP leader, Biman Prasad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is rather unfortunate that our good friend, Honourable Attorney General, spent quite a bit of time attacking the opposition and attacking people who have raised legitimate questions, including the former Prime Minister Mahendra Chaudhry, who is not here to defend himself. But let me Let me say this, Mr. Speaker. The Minister said that the facts are clear. The fact of the matter is that the facts are not clear. That is the problem. The facts are not clear. When the opposition decided to support the guarantee of $455 million, Mr. Speaker, we did that with good intention. We wanted to support the airline. We wanted to support the workers. And immediately after that, they kicked the guts of the workers. They didn't even respect the agreement. Let me tell this, about the facts. Let me tell this as well. There's an email from a CEO, Fiji Airways CEO, to one of the senior managers, where he's actually expressing concern about the leaking of disclosure information with respect to the agreement between KfW, the German bank, and the Wangabuka. So, the point is, Mr. Speaker, that the facts are not clear. There is no transparency. And the Minister for Economy should explain that. And again, all this creates the perception that there is some kind of shady dealing, the secrecy. And this is the reason, Mr. Speaker, we, for the last 4 or 5 years, have asked this government to bring Fiji Airways annual reports and table it in Parliament, so that the report goes to the appropriate committee, so that the Parliament discusses it, the people of this country know every detail, because we are the major shareholders. And Mr. Speaker, it is quite illogical for this government to keep saying, oh no, past governments didn't do that. I mean, of course, you were here to correct past government's mistake, and you are now saying, because the past governments didn't produce the report, you don't want to do that as well. Mr. Speaker, last week, I sent one of my staff members to the company's office, and the staff actually spent 4 hours and found only 3 copies of annual financial statements. 4 hours, Mr. Speaker. And that too at a cost of about $10 for the first 10 pages and 50 cents per page thereafter. So I want to know from the Honorable Attorney General, I want to know from you, if all copies of financial statements are available in the company's office, why we were only able to access 3 copies? We were told that the others are not there. The question is, where are the other financial statements?
Where did you go?
Just last week, the staff went. Last week the staff went there. I spent 4 hours. 4 hours.
Order.
Is there a Fiji Airways group file in the office? If yes, why are only 3 years of financial statements in Air Pacific file? Things don't just add up. Last month, this is another reason, another confusion. Last month, when speaking at the Nandi Chamber of Commerce meeting, the CEO of Fiji Airways, who is also now incidentally the chair of the Fiji Development Bank, said that the lease and loan agreements that bound Fiji Airways were a noose around the airline's neck. He said that. And then he also said that deferment of lease repayments were not an option for the airline, as defaulting one lease arrangement payment would mean losing all, in other words, every other asset. This is what he said at that meeting. This was in total contradiction to what the minister said on the 25th of May in Parliament.
Order.
So naturally, there would be serious questions about what has happened. And if that's what the CEO was saying, then technically it meant the Fiji Airways was insolvent. So, Mr. Speaker, instead of coming here and blaming every Tom, Dick and Harry, as he calls it, about that we are trying to derail the airline, what he should do is to present to Parliament, all the financial statements, a detailed plan of how Fiji Airways is going to ride this through. We need to discuss that. The Economic Affairs Committee needs to look at all those annual reports. That's when we will have clarity. That's when the facts will be clear. That's when we can move ahead, Mr. Speaker. So it's no point blaming the opposition of being unpatriotic and trying to get the airline down. We all understand the economics of it. How it's related to the economy, what it's going to do and what not. So it's no point coming here and explaining all that to us. We know that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Another issue that took up time in Parliament was with regards to the Care Fiji app that is part of Fiji's actions to combat COVID-19. The Attorney General Ayaz Said Qayyum explained how the app works.
Just for those people who may not still understand, I've got my app on. It's on in the background all the time. If Honourable Kepa announced she's got an app on, which hopefully she does, our apps actually, our Bluetooth is simply bouncing off each other. And because we've been in a room for more than 15 minutes, the proximity of 2 meters, all it does, on an encrypted form, her phone records my number and my phone records her number in encrypted form. It does not say that we were here in the chambers. It won't say if I met up for her for dinner tonight. It won't say where I met up with her. It does not give any location whatsoever. All it does, it gives the encrypted number, and that number is stored for 28 days. On the 29th day, Honorable Kepa's number will fall off from my phone, and my number will fall off from her phone. The record is only for 28 days. God forbid that in the process, should in a week's time that I get COVID-19, I get tested COVID-19, what the Ministry of Health will tell me is, who have you been in contact with over the past 28 days? Humanly, none of us, some of us more than others, cannot remember who we met over the past 28 days. All you will do then, if I go up to the Ministry of Health and I have COVID-19, they say, who have you been in contact with? They will then give me a PIN number. They'll ask me if I have Fiji App. Give me a PIN number, and I put it in with by my own self. All the numbers that I have been in contact with for the past 28 days within that close proximity and for 15 minutes will appear on a dashboard in the Ministry of Health. Ministry of Health will then simply get those phone numbers. They won't know where we met. They won't know where the numbers were traced. They simply have the numbers. They won't even have your name. They'll simply call the number and say, excuse me, this is Ministry of Health, we are calling. You have recently been in touch or contact with somebody who tested positive for COVID-19. Where are you? Please quickly come to the nearest health center, whatever it is. And immediately we are able to ring fence a possible contact that could possibly have COVID-19. That's the gist of it. It's very simple.
Professor Biman Prasad again responded to the Attorney General and told the government that people do not trust them. He called for bipartisanship and for government to work with the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to pick up from the Honourable Attorney General's concluding remarks, and I think he's right, Mr. Speaker. We can build confidence in our community, and part of the problem, part of the problem with the app, for example, this government needs to think, why people are talking about it, why some people are reluctant, because they seem not to trust this government. They seem not to trust this government. And I think there is a total lack of understanding of the role of parliamentary inquiry committees, Mr. Speaker. I had Honourable Reddy saying, bipartisanship means, you two parties this side. Bipartisanship means government and opposition. Government and opposition. But it's an issue, Mr. Speaker. In the past, we've moved motions for inquiry on health, on sugar, on drugs, and the government rejected it. And look at the state of those sectors that we wanted to look at. The committee, Mr. Speaker, I think there is a fear that this government has, because they are so busy trying to make themselves look good, that they feel that if there is a committee, that somehow the opposition is going to hijack it and use it for political purposes, because they keep talking about politicizing the issue. That's not the objective, Mr. Speaker. I've had a lot of the arguments from the other side that, because, we criticize government, we can't sit in a committee. That's not true. Once you form the committee, for example, if this committee goes to parts of the country, together, and says, look, we need to find out what's happening. We need to talk about this app. All of you guys need to download this app. If it is coming as a collective voice from Parliament, it will increase. It will do it. It will help. It will help people to have confidence. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, it is very important at this time when you have a crisis to build confidence. And the best way, they don't seem to understand that politicians can build confidence. And especially when they come together, from the government side and the opposition side. It's not about, some of us are not here just to think about politics. We're here to put some ideas across on behalf of the people, because we, Mr. Speaker, we also go to people. I know the government side goes, we go there as well. And sometimes, they feel more confident in raising issues with us than with the government, because there is a certain level of fear in the community. In fact, people, Mr. Speaker, always tell me, I can't say this, please don't take my name in Parliament because, I might not get this. I mean, this is how fearful people are. And that is why I'm saying that sometimes the confidence can come if we have some committee. So even if we argue that the government has all these committees that the Honourable Attorney General, we know that. But an inquiry committee, a bipartisan committee, is not only about making the government look bad or finding out the wrongs that they do. It's also about holding the government as a bipartisan committee to account as to what they do. And, as one of my colleagues from the side said, the government member is chairing the committee, Mr. Speaker. They have 3 members. There is no problem. In fact, when I was the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, Mr. Speaker, I want to give you the example. The 3 government members that I had were the best in that committee. We worked very well. In fact, they were doing a better job than what I expected. They were asking the right questions. They were doing the right thing. And so committees doesn't. Well, you, Mr. Speaker, actually, honourable member damaged more about the app when he actually didn't know. Because the Attorney General actually explained it very clearly in Parliament how it works. And then he goes, and not only once, he says it twice. The wrong thing. I mean, that actually killed because people were ringing me. People were calling me, Mr. Speaker, and saying, what is Honourable Reddy saying? I said, no, maybe he's made a mistake. But then when I read the Fiji Times, he actually repeated it twice. So let's not be pretend that government has all the information. The fact of the matter is that government ministries, government departments, government ministers don't always have the full information, and therefore a committee of this nature would have been helpful. I mean, this report by the ILO, these report, the recommendations they've made and the findings that they have on workers and businesses actually can be quite useful, and there are various other reports. So a committee can bring all that together, and I think when you talk about socio-economic issues, okay, the government, Mr. Speaker, might have a macro picture of what is happening at a macro level, but there are a lot of social problems that we see, that you talk to people, and these can be well understood, and policies targeted through this committee, made relevant recommendations to relevant ministries can help. So it's a good motion. It could have inspired confidence. It could have brought the opposition and government together. But this government is so fearful about politics because they are busy politicking. I can see that. And that's why, it's actually quite sad that even right now, they don't seem to get this. So, Mr. Speaker, I would urge the government to try this one out. Try this one out. Let's see how the opposition does not play politics, and opposition is prepared to deal with it. So try this. And the Prime Minister talks about how we're going to waste the resources and all that. That's, Mr. Speaker, nonsense. It's not about resources. It's about getting the opposition and government to work together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That was NFP leader Biman Prasad. However, the Attorney General Ayaz Said Qayyum accused the opposition of running a negative campaign against the app that he labelled as false, misleading and irresponsible.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I had yesterday referred to the comments by Honourable Gerwin Tembu. Unfortunately, the 3 members of NFP are not here. They sort of scurried out just a few minutes ago. And also for the comments made by Honourable Prasad. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I had referred to some of the newspaper articles which I had brought with me over here. One of them says, an act of rebellion, majority of Fijians will not download Fiji App, Lenora claims, as the Fiji Times article says. If you read it, Mr. Speaker, sir, although she may not be necessarily saying, I don't download it, she's essentially saying to everybody, don't download it. That's what she's saying. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it is quite highly irresponsible. And she's sort of citing political reasons. This downloading of this app is not actually a political issue. It's actually a health issue. It's a health and safety issue. And I know the honourable members of the opposition were, featured and had been asked questions from SODELPA. But I'm glad to say at least their responses weren't stupid. Because if you look at what NFP had said, the NFP leader said, we called him up and he said, why are you people asking stupid questions to individuals? Don't ask me this silly question. At least the other SODELPA members actually gave a good, reasonable answer. And I understand that some of them may have actually downloaded that app. It is really important. I please urge you to do that. And I thank you for doing so.
That was part of the debate in Parliament this week. And that's also our show for the evening. Join us again next week. Good night.